Hey there, this is Katherine Cartwright. Welcome to the ScrapbookPal channel. I am sharing some products from Spellbinders. I have this beautiful die set called Christmas Blooms. And then there is also this stamp set, Lots of Wishing You Sentiments. There are two dies that you stamp and die cut out Wishing You, and then a ton of sentiments for a lot of different occasions. Retirement, Christmas, anniversary, thanks and gratitude. There's a Thanksgiving stamp, which is wonderful, a speedy recovery, a bright future. So just about every occasion you could think of to have a card that you might need, this stamp set could be the one for you. So let's get started. I've got this embossing folder called Forevergreen. This is also a Spellbinders product. I'm going to cut this to size. This is going to be 4 by 5 1/4. A standard A2 size card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I've cut it just a little bit smaller because I'm going to layer it onto something else. I've got this Sizzix adhesive sheet, this double-sided adhesive that I'm going to apply to a piece of red cardstock. I'm going to cut out a couple of items that are very thin, and instead of trying to add a dry adhesive afterwards or a liquid adhesive, this is the way that I'm going to work around the thinness of it. And I love double-sided adhesive for sure. So this is the Winter Label Motifs. I am in love with this set as well. It works beautifully with the Christmas blooms. And it had this cool little swirly piece, I guess you would call it. I'm not sure what you would actually put a name on it. A decorative element, I guess you could say. And I am going to cut 2 of these through my die cutting machine. And you can see they're pretty thin. So that is why I applied that adhesive on the front. And I'll add those on a little bit later. Also from that label set, I have cut the green and white label. I'm going to use that to add all of these beautiful Christmas blooms die cut pieces on there. I've gone ahead and cut them. There is an adorable pine cone and some poinsettias, and then some holly leaves that go with everything, and then some kind of longer stems as well. And so I'm going to start though by stamping out my sentiments because I need those die cut so I can layer those onto my label. So I've got this big beautiful font, Wishing You. I love that it cuts around the word. I have a lot of die cut words which are wonderful to have in your stash, but it's kind of a fun, fresh thing to have a stamp and then have the die cut around it. So I think that is a fun element to have in your craft stash. I used Rockin Red from Katherine ink, and I am going to add a little bit of tape to keep my die in position. And then I will run this through my machine, and you will see that it cuts very nicely, very closely around the sentiment, and it just looks really good. So I'm going to peel this off and pop this out carefully. And then you can see how cute it is once it comes out. And again, you know, you could emboss these and then die cut them. So there's a lot of variety you could have with this. And then I can start putting some of this together. So I'm going to lay out some of my pieces. I need to put my flower together. I've got this adorable little pine cone. I could have added some adhesive to this as well. This is a fairly thin die as well. This would have been a good one to put some of that double-sided adhesive on, but I just took a little bit and rubbed my finger around with the wet adhesive enough to cover the back, and then I can put this together. So I've got my lighter cardstock, and then I put the brown on top. I've got 2 flowers that are the same size. There's a larger size and a smaller size in this Blooms die set. And then I'm going to add a smaller one on top. You could keep layering the same size, but I decided I wanted to have a little bit of interest there. So I decided to put the third and a little different one, smaller one I should say, on top. All right, so now things are starting to come together. I've got the Wishing You cut, and I'm going to try and decide how I want to lay it on here. I definitely wanted it at an angle. I love the font, and it has kind of a movement to it, so I thought it'd be fun if I kind of set it on an angle. And then I want to add my pine cone and my little poinsettia flower as well. I'm going to pop up the poinsettia, but I'm going to glue down the pine cone. That way I can kind of create a bouquet with some of these elements. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of glue to that pine cone where I want it. And then I'm going to come here and add this label to the back, to the front of the green, so it is ready to go on the card. And I have everything where I want it to be when I do finally attach that to my embossed panel. So I've removed the adhesive backing on there, and I can add my flower. And then I'm just going to start coming in here and add some of my greenery. I'm going to trim a little bit of it down, and then I will glue that directly onto the paper. I'm kind of pulling up my flower there, and then I will take my time and get these pieces exactly where I want them to be. I just, with a die set like this, I love to sit in front of the TV and cut a bunch of them from scrap paper. It's a great way to use your scrap paper. And then I have a bunch of different colors. So I have 3 or 4 different shades of green cardstock that I tend to use. So I will just pull out little scraps like that, and then I can cut them and use them for different projects. So it's a great way to kind of die cut all at once, and then you have stuff for later when you're ready. And I'm actually going to use some of my extra pieces that I cut in another card in just a second. So we get a little extra with the leftovers, so to speak, that I had already die cut. So I'm just trying to figure out exactly where I want this piece to go, and I can at this point kind of see where I think it should be. So I'm going to move on to gluing down my Wishing You. And again, just love this font. It's so fresh and modern, and it looks really pretty stamped out in that red against the white and the green. So I'm gluing those directly onto my label, and then I've decided that I needed to add just a little bit more greenery. I had a little bit too much white space, and so I kind of trimmed and went through my stash of the ones I had already cut and added just a couple of more. I had some of these smaller ones as well, and then a little more of these little tiny leaves in that different shade of green. So you could build this up as much as you wanted to, or you could leave it as plain as you wish. So there, again, a lot of variety in what you can do with a die set like this. Okay, so I'm liking how this is coming together. I am going to adhere this to my card in a second, but I do have these little swirl pieces that I want to add first. The vision that I had was to add this at the top and the bottom. And so I'm just kind of laying out how that's going to work. I'm going to peel back the adhesive backing here and get this laid down. What I like about this adhesive as well is it is permanent, but it is temporary for a bit of time. So if you need to move it around, which I am going to need to move it around in just a second, and you'll see why. So I'm going to lay this bottom piece down, and I've got my label in the middle to make sure that I don't have any overlap. And then I'm going to peel off the backing on this other piece, and you'll see where I run into a little bit of a problem. And thankfully, since this adhesive is temporary, I have a second to move it around. So I turned it the opposite way. I thought I might like that. But then once I laid it on the actual cardstock, I decided that I wanted them to be the same direction. So I peeled this up, and it didn't tear my cardstock again because it is repositionable for a smidge, and then it becomes permanent. So I love that feature about the adhesive. It gives you a few seconds to play with, and then when you press it down, it will cure and be very permanent. So I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to take my bone folder and press that paper against the adhesive, and I have a great little element, decorative element on my card. I'm going to add some adhesive, liquid adhesive, to the back of this embossed panel, and I'm going to go ahead and glue this onto a red card base. Again, this is an A2 sized card. So if you're new to card making in the US, we tend to make A2 size cards, which are 4.25 inches by 5.5 inches. So that's the finished size of this card. All right, I went ahead and stamped and heat embossed with white embossing powder this sentiment holiday cheer. And I'm just showing you again some of these sentiments because there's so many on there. Oh, and there's also a happy anniversary. I failed to mention that, and an Easter one. So again, this is a great set for any kind of occasion. I've got some of this foam creative sheets that I've trimmed down. I'm going to add to the back of my label, and then I can adhere it to my card base. And then I will add a little bit more adhesive to add that holiday cheer as well. So I'm just kind of centering this up. I'm really just eyeballing it. And then I'm going to add a little piece of foam tape. I want this holiday cheer to come out in the middle and to come off of that label. And so I'm going to trim down another piece of foam because I've popped up that label and I want my holiday cheer to be flat and at the same height. So I'm just adding a little bit of foam to the outside edge where I know that it's going to go down if I don't pop some foam up to get it to the same height. And then I'll just add glue to the front half of underneath the holiday. So then everything is nice and uniform. Got that pressed down, and there we go. I'm going to come back here and add, I know I want to add a little center to my flower. I've got these Pinkfresh little pearls, and this is a silver matte color. And I've got my little sticky tool here. I'll pull this out in just a second to get it attached to my card. And then I'm going to take my pokey tool and just make sure that my pearl is exactly where I want it to be. So there we go, wishing you holiday cheer. So that's the first card, and then I'm going to come back. I've got another embossing folder called Falling Leaves, again from Spellbinder. It just has so much beautiful detail. And then I have cut a strip about probably, I'd say it's 1/2 inch, if that, for the top of this card. And this will make more sense in just a second why I'm doing this. But I mentioned I had some leftovers from die cutting, and I certainly didn't want them to go to waste. So I decided to make a second card. So instead of gluing these little elements directly to the top of my card, I decided to cut a thin strip, and then I will use that to attach it to my card. I wanted to put some foam underneath it to add some dimension, but to try and put foam under each of these little pieces, especially the thin ones, I think would be really challenging. So I decided that this might be a workaround to give me the height and dimension that I wanted at the top. And so I'm just kind of placing that on there to make sure I've got things where I want them to be. You can see I cut another one of those labels out. I used a yellow cardstock on this one, kind of a warm yellow, to work with that orange. And once I have those dry, I'm going to add a few more. I had a few more. Like I say, I did a bunch of die cutting, having lots of fun. And then I'm just trying to pick the colors that I want and which ones are going to be the extras. And I finally settle on a couple of more just to kind of round out this little element. And then I will come back and trim the tops of these. And then it will be ready to be placed on the card. So you can see I've got a little bit of the tails here. Just going to trim these down. I've got one that's kind of coming loose that I'll need to fix. And then I will trim off that end. So it's nice and uniform there. Okay, got one more that's a little loose that I will repair. And now I can use a little bit more of that foam adhesive. I'm going to cut a thin strip the length of this cardstock, and then I will add that onto the top of my card. Also too, with it being embossed, it could be a little challenging to kind of get it glued on as well, just directly those little elements. So that's why I decided to try this strip idea. That way I could add a little bit of height above my label. I have gone ahead and stamped and die cut. I used some Katherine ink. I think this is Tiki Torch. And this one is going to be all about Thanksgiving. So I love that it has a Thanksgiving element in it as well. So I've glued those, I die cut those, I stamped directly the Happy Thanksgiving on there and added that to the yellow panel. And then I will add this to my card. And this was all just added to a white card base. I do have a couple of pumpkins from this Welcome Fall die set. This is also from Spellbinders, and it has two different pumpkins in it. So I cut them from a little bit darker shade of orange cardstock and then added a little stem on each of them that's included in that die set. So here are the two cards that I made using that Christmas Blooms and some embossing folders and that beautiful stamp set. Lots of wishing you sentiments. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe to ScrapbookPal if you don't. They have so much great content, lots and lots of fun videos. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day. Thanks so much for watching.